Abuse is always a choice. Abusers are very good at using manipulative language. When you listen to that audio, he says, I aggressed you. That's not even terminology that most people use. I aggressed you. What does that even mean? So then she corrected him and said, you choked me and threw me against the wall. You choked me and threw me against the wall. No, you didn't aggress me. You choked me and threw me against the wall. To which he responded, allegedly, all of that falls under the term aggressed. I believe in love and I want to see all marriages succeed. But I know that's not always possible because marriage requires resources. And when both people do not have the resources to work together, marriages don't work. Actor Jonathan Major secretly married actress Meagan Good just 4 months after he was convicted of harassment and assault of his ex-girlfriend. This is also coincidentally happening just a couple of days ahead of his magazine Dreams release. You may recall that this movie was supposed to be his big breakout movie a couple of years ago. Many writers were even saying that it might be Oscar worthy. In the midst of that buzz, a lot of writers and creatives in Hollywood were basically protesting for more pay. And while this was happening is when everything came out about him assaulting his ex-girlfriend. Following that assault, that project ended up getting canned and not released. It's recently been picked back up and it just got released yesterday. So naturally, he's been on a PR tour to promote this film. Now, this is a perfect case of work intercepting with real life. Have you ever been at work while you're dealing with a very serious situation, but you got to put on a smiley face and go on and do the thing, like, hi, how's it going, everyone? Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Like, if you've ever worked a job, then you know what that's like. There are times when there are very heavy, very real things happening in your real life that you have to kind of put on the back burner. What happened with his ex-girlfriend has made it very difficult for him to continue working the way he was working before. This is his number one opportunity to get back out there in a positive light. And obviously, he's going to do everything that he can to get back on. Before we get into the astrology reading for this couple, I just want to be clear in saying that I want to use this as an opportunity to highlight patterns in their natal chart that may indicate to future troubles, and also educate about abuse and violence and domestic violence in general. Oftentimes, abusers are also victims of abuse at the hands of others, and such is the case with Jonathan Majors. He has recently admitted that from the age of 9 onward, he was sexually abused by adult men and women. So when you have this kind of history in your childhood and you move on with your life and you sweep it under the rug and you do not address it and you don't do anything to make it better, you don't do anything to heal it, what do you think is going to happen? That's the thing about abuse, and that's the thing about trauma. The grief from that experience that doesn't just leave our body magically. I'm a firm believer in manifestation and the power of magic to manifest the life of your dreams. But when it comes to negative energy that others have transferred from their trauma onto you, you don't just magically get rid of that without facing that discomfort and talking about that discomfort and handling that discomfort. And clearly, this is what this man is doing now. What has happened has happened. He has admitted to what has happened. He's gone through a court of law, has been convicted of what has happened, and he's now in the process of healing. This movie getting picked up in the middle of his healing journey has kind of forced him back to the public to talk to us about both this movie and what has happened. And another interesting thing that happened for him in the middle of all of this is that he happened to have met Meagan Good and developed a very intimate relationship with her, which has now morphed into this love relationship that the two of them are speaking about. So imagine going through all of this at one time. It is a lot. I don't suspect for 1 second that he has dealt with any of this. And all of this is going to be with him for quite a while before he's in a position where he can honestly say that he has done his healing work around it. So let's get into the facts of the case. Jonathan Majors married actress Meagan Good after being convicted of assault and harassment. After this conviction, his career crashed. A New York City jury found him guilty of assaulting and harassing his ex-girlfriend, Grace Jabari. His ex-girlfriend, Grace, was awarded an order of protection against him as a result of that sentencing. When reading her witness statement during that trial, she said, "He's not sorry. He has not accepted responsibility. He will do this again." Marvel and Disney, who were the main employers of Jonathan prior to this event, shortly after that verdict came out, distanced themselves from him and basically dropped him. So he was quote unquote canceled, because that's generally what happens in that world, is that when you get dropped from your employers, you're suddenly banned and canceled, which when you're an actor, that is the only means of income that you can generate is through your art. And when various employers are coming together to say they do not want to be associated with you, it makes it very hard for you to be able to go on and make a living. Ever since all of that exploded, he has been on a redemption tour with actress Meagan Good by his side, helping him to clean up his image and rebuild his career. So this release of Magazine Dreams is a huge step in that direction, hence the getting married prior to the movie coming out. Let's go over their astrology natal chart compatibility. After we go over their astrology chart reading, I will share my final thoughts about what science says about those types of relationships. Jonathan Majors is a Virgo sun. She, Meagan Good, is a Leo sun. Virgo and Leo are not compatible. He is a Sagittarius moon at the 8th degree, which gives Scorpio energy. This is where all of the anger issues come from. I've shared with you guys before that Scorpio is a deeply traumatized zodiac sign in general because it is a karmic. Scorpio is brought to families to help heal the bloodline of that family. And in the process of that healing, Scorpio has to endure a lot of abuse at the hands of others, specifically those that are in positions of power over them. So it starts with their parents and their siblings, and then it goes out in the world and gets transferred on to other people. As you know, a lot of life is energetic. It's spiritual. So when you have Scorpio at the moon, you're expected to be able to withstand a lot of abuse. And unfortunately, sometimes what that looks like is you take on so much and you can't take it anymore. And then you start dishing it back to other people, which is what I suspect happened here with his ex-girlfriend. Scorpio has themes around power, control, abuse, manipulation, but specifically abuse of power. So when I think about somebody like him who has a history of abusing others, due to a Rolling Stone magazine that came out with all of this long history, it goes back really to Scorpio energy and to suffering a childhood plagued with this kind of toxicity that Scorpio is actually here to heal. So this is what Scorpio does, is that they take a lot of abuse from others because they're supposed to learn how to alchemize that energy and cleanse it out and take compassion and love and forgiveness and replace all of the anger and the violence and abuse with that. And it starts really with love of self, compassion of self, and forgiveness towards the self. Scorpio as a zodiac sign really struggles with all of these themes that are mentioned. The other thing that's very common with Scorpio as a zodiac sign is abuse when it comes to sexuality. As you know, Scorpio rules life and death in astrology. And life and death happens with our sexual organs, A human life is created because people get their sexual organs together. So Scorpio rules our sexual organs and our sexuality for this reason. So Scorpio moon generally also speaks, whenever it's in the negative or unhealed stage, to abuse when it comes to sexuality. Her moon is in Scorpio. The two of them have a trauma bond, okay? The two of them are bonding around childhood trauma that they've suffered that has really rendered them the adults that they are now. They probably have a lot of compassion and love for each other around this theme of trauma because guess what? They survived it. Given the intensity of Scorpio moon, it's not unusual for many of them to struggle with substance abuse and to struggle with inability to really be like a healthy, functioning member of society. So the two of them haven't been able to survive what they've survived to get to this point where they're still fighting and thriving for their lives is really remarkable. Regardless of this history that he has with his ex, it does not erase the fact that he has fought for the life that he currently has. And obviously he is continuing to fight for it in, going on this press tour and going out there and doing the things that he needs to do to try to regain the trust of the public. When two people who have Scorpio moon come into a relationship, what you can expect is a deeply transformative spiritual bond. Whether good or bad, these two are going to excavate their darkest demons from each other, expose them to each other, and in my greatest heart, I hope that they also help each other heal from some of that. Moving on to Mercury. He has his Mercury in Libra. She has her Mercury in Leo. These two are compatible when it comes to their Mercury placements. We'll get into some of the aspects later so we can see how those play into their connection. From there, he has his Mars in Virgo at the Capricorn degree, making him a highly karmic Mars placement, meaning that what he does create in this world is very potent. Good or bad, it's going to be felt very, very intensely. She has her Mars in Cancer. Mars in Cancer and Mars in Virgo are highly compatible. Moving on to Jupiter, he has his Jupiter in Cancer and she has her Jupiter in Libra. Jupiter in Cancer and Jupiter in Libra are not compatible in astrology. He has his Saturn in Capricorn at the Libra degree. Again, very karmic placement. Saturn is the planet of karma in astrology. So when someone has a karmic zodiac sign, Capricorn, at the planet of karma, it makes them extra karmic-y. The same goes for Scorpio, which he has at the moon. It is also a karmic placement. And the third karmic placement in astrology is Aquarius. She has a Libra at her Saturn. Libra is exalted at Saturn. So this is they're both very karmic people. And this is looking like a very karmic bond between the two of them. And a karmic bond is what we call a fated bond. It means there was no way to avoid it. You are going to meet this person. You are going to get together with this person. And the spiritual lessons that you are supposed to learn in this life from this person, you're going to learn them, good or bad. It means it was fated. It was destiny because you and this person have done this love thing before over the course of multiple lives. And you're back here again trying to redo what you've done before. I see a lot of karmic couples in my practice when it comes to couple synastry relationships because karmic relationships can be very crazy making. Because on one hand, because you have this karmic history together, there is a lot of familiarity here. There's a lot of love. There's a lot of like love at first sight type of energy. Like this person feels like family right away. However, the trauma that you both have endured over the course of multiple lives that you bring to this life, you have to have worked on it and you have to have healed from it. And when both parties are not willing to do that healing work before they get together, what ends up happening is that they end up reenacting that abuse with each other. And I'm hoping that's not the case here, but that's what this is giving at the Saturn placement for both of them. Moving on to Uranus, which is a planet of progress and evolution, both of them also have very karmic placements of Uranus. His is in Capricorn, the master OG karmic, and hers is in Scorpio, the chaotic karmic. So whether this ends up being a good marriage or a terrible marriage, either way, it's going to be an explosive marriage with a lot of accountability at the end of it. Next, let's talk about Neptune, the planet of dreams. His is in Capricorn at the Sagittarius degree, and hers is in Sagittarius at the Capricorn degree. Are you seeing the theme so far? These two are literally reflecting each other at every important placement so far. Moving on to Pluto. He has his Pluto in Scorpio at the Pisces degree, and she has her Pluto in Libra at the Libra degree. I hate these kinds of readings because I hate like the incessant like repetition of energy. So what's happening here is karma, 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 karma from top to bottom, from Saturn all the way to Pluto. It's karmic between these two. There is no getting out of this companionship without serious things happening. And that's why they got married, because marriage is very serious. So they went into this setting the tone for what this connection is going to be. This connection is a karmic connection. It's a huge connection in terms of their spiritual development. And they need to tread very lightly with this because the repercussions from this are going to be major for both of them. Moving on to their North nodes. A North node in astrology is basically what is a direction that your life is supposed to be traveling down if you're doing this right. You know, your South node is going to be what feels the most comfortable for you, because the North node is what's going to feel the most uncomfortable for you. Because the direction that your soul is supposed to be traveling towards is also going to be the direction that your soul does not want to travel towards, because none of us like working on ourselves. Okay? None of us like looking at our demons. None of us like facing our darkness. Some of us are more equipped to do it. Some of us are more excited by the idea of it. But most of us would rather avoid it. Most of us would rather avoid all the yucky things that have happened in our childhood. We would rather pretend that we grew past it. We evolved past it. It's behind us. You know, I'm not living in my past. I'm living in my future. All of those, you've heard all of those terminologies that we use to kind of run away from ourselves. But the thing about our shadows is that we can't run away from ourselves. You and I cannot run away from ourselves. We are who we are. This is why in the world of spirituality, we believe karma is destiny. Because your propensity for self-reflection is part of your karma. Your willingness to self-reflect and to heal is part of your karma. So the North Node tells us, where are you supposed to go if you're doing things right? He's actually supposed to go away from the light of Hollywood. He's supposed to be more private. He's supposed to go away from the limelight. He's supposed to go into his own independent lane, doing his own thing away from the mainstream, because he has his North Node in Aquarius. And he's also supposed to go towards spirituality, towards religion, towards what's metaphysical, you know, understanding spirits, understanding energy, understanding psychic energy, understanding spirituality, the connection to divinity. You know, his mother is a pastor. So I suspect that he has feelings, strong feelings about religion. That's what my gut is telling me, because his mother is a pastor. When you grow up in a very religious home, like myself, I did, with, you know, a father that was very active in a church and had a leadership role in the church, it brings about a lot of feelings. And for many of us, what it creates is this kind of like religious trauma associated with being who we are, because we're told from a very young age that who we are is not enough. It's not good enough, and it's never going to be good enough. And there's a lot of self-hatred that often comes with that energy. And there's also a lot of shame around sexuality that comes with that energy. So when you happen to be a child who has Scorpio moon, you know, it comes with a lot of toxicity, because the message is sex is bad and you don't do it until you're married. But when you're being sexually abused or you're being sexually molested, there is no avenue to discuss this, because that doesn't fit into a box. And sometimes those environments can also have very toxic messaging around forgiveness. You know, you're told, oh, if somebody has molested you, somebody has raped you, somebody has sexually abused you, you should forgive, because that's what Jesus would do, which does nothing really to address the harm that has been done upon you. It does nothing to hold the abuser accountable for the abuse. And more importantly, it does nothing to bring you healing, which is what's needed, repair after the trauma has happened. So part of Jonathan Major's story in this life is to really reconcile his feelings about religiosity, spirituality, and how to regain that connection to divinity, to spirit, to source, to the master architect, to the creator of life, to this universal Gaia energy that all of us are a part of. His was disconnected. His was disconnected in childhood. So he's here to relearn how to love himself unconditionally and how to give himself unconditional self-compassion. And that really comes from being away from the light. And unfortunately, because he needs to make a living, like all of us, he's being forced into the light to try to regain the traction that he lost 2 years ago when this abuse and harassment case came out. Moving on to Meagan Good, her North Node is in Leo at the 0 degree. So she's actually here to do the opposite of what he's here to do. She's supposed to be in the limelight. She's here to be a star, a mega star that is seen and heard everywhere. She's here to be in the limelight, as Leo is represented by the sun, and the sun is the brightest star. Not in our solar system, but it's the brightest star in the world of astrology. So wherever you have Leo in astrology is the part of your life that you will never be able to keep private. No matter how private you are, people will find a way to get access to information about that part of your life. So for her, no matter where she goes, what she does, she's going to be in the public's eye, and she's here to do exactly that. So back to being karmic, right? You have one person in the relationship who's here to take a back seat from the limelight, and another who's here to take a front seat. So assuming they're doing their healing work, they can both respectively play this game of one is in the shadow and one is in the light, so they can prosper together. But if they haven't done their healing work, there's going to be competition. There's going to be insecurities. There's going to be wanting to, compete in the limelight together, like wanting to dominate each other about how many movies have you been in? How many awards have you won? Like that kind of stuff. And that's not really what they're here for. They're actually here to build each other up, build each other's self-esteem and confidence. So I'm so glad that they found each other, because they actually reflect each other's confidence to one another. And it's quite interesting that they fell in love in the midst of this scenario, because I can tell with his Virgo sun that his self-esteem was in the gutter when this happened, when this information was put out there in the public. And nobody can give you love like a Leo. That Leo love is so potent, it's so powerful, it's so healing, it's so innocent, it's so loyal, it's so devoted, it's so all or nothing that I know she's taking very good care of him, that she's really nursing him back to health. I believe I saw an article of him saying that her family, of him saying that she and her family are the reason why he's still alive. So I don't know if he's alluding to the fact that he may have felt suicidal as a result of this, but I can see from their chart that she has definitely done him a solid with helping him bounce back. Now moving on to their Lilith. Lilith in astrology is our spiritual baddie energy, so spiritual goddess energy. It's the energy that we need to step into to overcome, the messaging from life, to overcome the conditioning from Earth, to overcome the negativity, that we have to deal with on Earth. So his is in Libra. So this means that this marriage is actually what he needs to be able to evolve. Because prior to this marriage, he has a long history of being fiercely independent and fiercely non-committal, and basically determined to do it his way, on his terms, by himself, okay? And obviously he can do it. But the spiritual lessons that he really needs to learn to evolve in this life are around partnership, togetherness, dealing with other people, sharing love. That's what Libra energy is about. It's how do we share love fairly? How do we treat each other fairly when we're together in a companionship? And you can see that him getting married right on the precipice of this movie coming out, which is him like career-wise, his first step career-wise in like trying to push himself forward back into a successful career, back into the limelight. And I think this marriage, from a spiritual perspective, was very strategic and important in order for him to regain the trust of the public. If they went ahead and added children to this marriage, whether had, children that they had biologically or adopted them, that would even bring him more healing. Your astrology natal chart can show you what it is that you need to do to heal yourself deeply. And in his case, this is what's needed. He needs to be more connected and less independent, more thoughtful about looking at life from the point of view of others and less focus on what's in it for him. Hers is in Scorpio at the Pisces degree. All of her healing is around religion, around spirituality as well. And it's around this idea of breaking free from control, breaking free from being manipulated, from being dominated, from being controlled, being able to make your own money, to have your own name, to be your own woman, to do things on your terms without necessarily being worried about being proper. Okay? Scorpio energy is the destroyer in astrology. Scorpio comes to destroy the status quo for the sake of elevation. And that elevation comes from going deep inside of yourself, inside of your trauma, to understand what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And then making decisions that are in harmony with what works for you, regardless of what society is saying works for you. So seeing that brings a little bit of conflict too in their Lilith, because what works for him really is marriage and children. And what works for her is having the relationship without the legal marriage. So again, we're having this kind of like synastry of like being on opposite sides of the spectrum in terms of what they both need to have harmony in the relationship. Now, moving on to the very last placement, which is Chiron. His Chiron is in Cancer. Chiron in Cancer speaks to a relationship with a mother that was not very nurturing. Mothering is hard, and not all mothers are good at it, okay? And if you were raised by a mother who was not nurtured by her mother, she will not be able to nurture you. Part of healing from a mother who was not very nurturing is understanding your history, understanding your karmic history in terms of who raised your mom, who raised that woman, and then deciding to do things differently for yourself. And then finding the courage and the compassion to give your mother grace for the things she couldn't be and couldn't provide, while also maintaining boundaries if she's still actively abusive and dismissive towards you. It's a lot of work, and it's very hard work, and it's very painful work. And many of us who've had to go through this journey of healing our mother wound understand that it's something that is a lifelong thing, because as your mother continues to be a part of your life, she will trigger you, because the abusive patterns that she coded you for are still a part of her. And now that you can see her as an individual, not just as your mother, you can separate the person from the role of mothering from the person. And if the person is wounded, they're going to bring their woundedness through their role. So expecting a wounded person to excel at mothering without any healing is unrealistic, okay? And then for him, because his mother is a pastor, I wonder how much healing she has done around her lack of mothering and how that is currently affecting their relationship. So there's definitely some mommy issues here with this connection. And because his mother is in the limelight, it's very hard for him to speak up about those mommy issues, because he doesn't want her to be seen in a negative light, because she holds a position of power in the community, which makes him feel even more suppressed, even more undermined. And if he's suffered abuse, Like, how is he supposed to get any sort of validation from his community about his abuse? One thing that he mentioned while he was on the Sherry Shepherd show is that his mother has never gone to any of his premieres. As someone that used to work as a therapist, when I hear that, my antennas go up. Because how are you this famous and this successful, and your mother has never attended any of your events? What is that about? Why is that? Of course, I don't know the ins and outs of why she's unable to travel to go support her son, but that really speaks to him feeling abandoned emotionally. Because I'm sure a premiere is very scary when you're an actor. It's like you did all that work in the dark, and now it's going to be shown to everybody, and you want people to have a good reception. It's helpful to have the people who love you around you when you're going through it, so that at least you can feel pumped up, a little encouraged, a little supported. So regardless of the reason why his mother couldn't be there, the fact of the matter is she couldn't, which means that he's had to do this Hollywood thing alone, which is not easy, being in the public's eye when your North Node is in Aquarius. Having a North Node in Aquarius means his South Node is in Leo. That means in previous lives, he's been famous multiple times. So in this life, he's being called to pursue the fame less and pursue altruism and humanitarianism more. In other words, use your fame to help others, not be famous for the sake of being famous. And for Meagan Good, it's the opposite. In previous lives, she used her position of power to help others. And in this life, she's supposed to be famous for the sake of being famous. And in some ways, you could argue that he's doing that right now by using this domestic violence and harassment case to speak up about these issues and to speak up about trauma and to speak up about, the cycle of violence in all of our lives. So he's doing that work. It looks messy, yes, and it looks convoluted, but he had no other choice. These are the cards that were dealt to him. And I think he's doing a marvelous job in responding to them in the moment. Meagan Good's Chiron is in Taurus. Her Chiron placement is also at the Capricorn degree, which is another karmic placement. So she has a history of attracting people who steal money from her, who use her for her money, and who make it hard for her to have a stable home. She has struggled with finding stability in her body her whole life because of disruptions, chaotic, emotional, traumatic things that happen that keep disrupting the stability that she's building. She is a bit older than him. I believe she's 8 years older than him. So there is a little bit of control that she's having in this relationship that she may not have had in previous relationships that hopefully allow her to exercise her control, her dominance a little bit more, her power a little bit more in making sure that she's protecting her assets, her valuables, her resources, her home life, all these things that we all need so we can feel stable. So for her, that's the main thing, to take responsibility for her finances, take responsibility for her home life, and to protect it. She is being called to be the leader in her home. So in order for this relationship to work, he has to give power to her for this to work. If he's unable or unwilling to give her the power and the control, if he's unable or unwilling to make her the matriarch of the home and give her the dominance in the home, this relationship is not going to work, because she is supposed to be more in the limelight than him. And she's also supposed to be the one that is keeping the quins together in a protective kind of way. He's able to generate the quins through his sensitivity, his emotionality. If he's really committed to this healing work, I think the public is going to respond well to him. I think the public is going to respond well to him going on this healing journey, but I think he's really going to have to commit to it for it to work, because that's actually why he's here. He's here to be the abusers that becomes the guy that actually helps others heal. And that's the role that he's playing. And I think we need to let him play it, because oftentimes we like to think about abuse happening in with these very rigid lines. It's like you're either an abuser or you're not an abuser. But sometimes the abused become the abusers. And he's the first time that we've seen, in my experience, the abused be the abuser and own that and own that publicly. Now let's go over some of the aspects in this relationship that are going to make this relationship hard to succeed. I need you to know that this means that these are the energies that are working against this partnership. Now, does that mean they can't both heal and find a happy medium with all of this? They can. So his Mercury is square her Mars. That speaks to poor communication in relationships. His Jupiter is square her Jupiter. That's not a good placement because Jupiter rules luck in astrology. And when your luck is in a gridlock, it means that you have different morals, you have different values, different ideas about what growth looks like, how to use spirituality to enhance one's success in life. And that naturally is gonna bring about some issues. His Jupiter is also square her Saturn, which this placement makes it hard for the love connection to grow into something stable, long-term, and fulfilling. As you know, Saturn is a planet of karma. So when karma isn't positively aligned with success, luck, growth, and expansion, it's not a good thing. His Saturn is square her Saturn. So again, we're having a gridlock here of the karmic planets. Saturn square Saturn usually speaks to working against each other. So not being able to see things from the other person's perspective and not being able to diminish your ego to make room for the other person's ego to take center stage. His Sun is square her Neptune. This means that his ego diminishes her dreams. His Pluto squares her Sun. This brings about a certain obsession. There's an obsessive interest here with each other. So it's not like a normal love connection where people gradually get to know each other. It's like an obsession, almost like you've seen a very magical creature in the middle of the forest and you cannot take your eyes off of it and you want to possess it, you want to dominate it, you want to rescue it. That's kind of what this is giving. It's giving fear of betrayal. It's giving paranoia, unhealthy obsession with them, with their essence, with their energy. Given that these two have a karmic bond, I can understand the obsession because they recognize each other from previous lives. His Pluto squares her Mercury. That speaks to competition in the relationship. It speaks to numerous arguments that don't have a solution because both parties are not able to communicate effectively to find a middle ground. His Mars squares her Neptune. This speaks to a karmic connection in which he wants to guide her. He wants to help her be successful. But because of her own history with abuse of power, with being used and being abused, she struggles to relent to him, to give him power, to let him be the man in the relationship in the traditional sense. And also because of his history with abuse, obviously she's going to be very uncomfortable letting him be the man in the relationship. The interesting component of this is that this squaring is happening at the Saturn degree. So again, speaking very heavily to karma, to karmic energy between the two of them. A karmic relationship basically comes to teach us that the way we've been doing life is not going to work for us. It's not going to take us to a brighter future. And we have to be willing to break with the old way of doing things so we can embrace the new way of doing things. This is why karmic relationships are so painful, because they expose your demons and then they force you to respond to them. And if you're brave, you're courageous, even though you feel afraid, you still step into that spiritual calling of evolution, of choosing a higher ground, a higher path, a new way. And for many of us, it can be a very scary decision. So many karmic couples don't make it because they're too attached to the old. Even though the old is not fulfilling, they're too attached to it. He has his Mars in Virgo. Mars in Virgo is naturally very good at analyzing what's wrong and getting to it quickly. And when a Mars in Virgo is in a relationship with you, they can't help but tell you what you're doing wrong for the sake of elevating you. But if you have issues with being corrected, being told you're doing something wrong, if you struggle with humility and being receptive, then yeah, it's going to create some tension. His Neptune, which is a planet of dreams, also opposes her Mars, which is what we use to manifest in astrology and to create a new reality. This means that this relationship is going to be plagued with a lot of deception, a lot of manipulation. And I suspect that a big part of their contention in this relationship is going to be around religion. Meagan Good was previously married to a pastor, so obviously that speaks to her being very religious. His mother is a pastor, so he grew up in a very religious household. It may be that he is one of those people that thinks of religion as a concept, like a philosophical concept to help guide our behavior. And she may think of religion as a practice that comes along with specific things that have to be done in a specific way in order for her to feel connected to spirit. I think there's going to be some tension here around illusions, around spirituality, around religion. And this is indicated by his Neptune being square her Jupiter. His Uranus is also square her Saturn. This tells me as an astrologer that she's the one who wanted to get married, especially because she has prominent Libra and Leo placements. Libra and Leo are very traditional zodiac signs. They like to do things in the way that society deems acceptable because these two get a lot of their energy from being liked by the public. So because of that, they don't really like relationships that don't fit into a mold. Generally, monogamy, generally marriage, and, that kind of thing. It doesn't mean they have to be necessarily monogamous while they're married, but they do need that marriage because Libra needs harmony and balance in their relationship and the grounding that marriage brings. It helps Libra thrive. When Libra doesn't have stability, balance, harmony in their relationship, they're not able to thrive. And Leo just needs to be respected by the public. So being a married woman, I can tell, was very important to her, especially because she's been married before. I certainly hope that he bought onto that program, especially since he also needs marriage to be successful. But if he's resisting that programming, this is going to be problematic for the relationship because she needs the marriage and he also needs it for his own spiritual development. His Neptune squares her Saturn, which means that, unfortunately, when she's trying to direct him, he's going to find her to be emotionally controlling and manipulative. He's going to find her to be emotionally trying to manipulate him, even though she's really just trying to help him craft his new image and secure the bag. She's trying to turn the situation into gold for him. But how much healing he's done is going to determine whether he actually allows her to be successful in doing this for him. This placement also brings a lot of themes around blaming one another, accusing one another of things that are not true and not rooted in reality, and shaming one another for each other's desires. So if they can watch these things, they can actually make this relationship work. Now, let's move on to some of the positive aspects of this connection. And I'm sorry, guys, but there isn't a lot of it, okay? So I'm going to give you the ones that are here. They're greatly aspected for marriage because marriage means work. Their project is each other. They're each other's karmic, and they're each other's helpers and healers. The fact that they got married is a good thing because it solidifies that they're committed to helping each other work. And contrary to popular beliefs, marriage means work. Marriage means you have to shed some of your negativity, some of your toxicity, some of your ego, some of the unhelpful ways that you do relationship for the sake of the other. And that's what marriage requires. And you have to do that over and over and over and over again. Venus sextile Neptune speaks to the two of them bringing each other healing energy via the arts, via creativity, via spirituality. I bet you those prayer sessions are chef's kiss with these two, because there's an energy here around these two that is very deeply healing, very spiritual, again, very karmic-y, okay? Karmic means divinely ordained. That's what it means. So this relationship is divinely ordained. I believe in the power of redemption. I believe in the power of healing. I don't believe that an abuser does not deserve to breathe the same air that the rest of us breathe, especially if they're committed to acknowledging their abuse and fixing that brokenness inside of them, which is what he's doing right now. Lastly, Mars in Virgo sextile Uranus in Scorpio is bringing a lot of dark feminine energy to the plate here. That makes this relationship feel like a stormy affair. So these two are the type that argue and then make up. That's kind of the relationship, that the energy that it's giving. That's a relationship that they're going to be cultivating. They're here to really work through the tough stuff, work through the disagreements, work through the arguments and the fights, work through the lack of, compassion that we sometimes can showcase each other when we're upset, and find their way back to love. If they're willing to work this relationship in the positive, it's going to be a very playful atmosphere. It's going to feel very healing, almost childlike. It's a kind of emotional safety that neither of them has ever had. Due to his less controlling nature with religion, she feels more free. And due to her less judgmental, position about morality, he feels more seen, because the bottom line is life is hard and all of us do bad things. All of us do things we regret. He made a bad decision. He regrets it. He's working on it. And that's literally all that we can ask of him. Do I think this marriage is going to last and be fulfilling? I'm not God. I don't know. Only God knows. But what I do know is that the science says that this marriage is going to have a lot of issues. Because the thing about healing, I know that making yourself aware of the root of the issue is just the beginning. That's not healing. That's just awareness. Then you have to take that awareness and work to unpack it in every aspect of it, and then see how it shows up in your day-to-day. And that only comes with time. My therapy background has taught me that abusers have controlling and manipulative patterns that make them incapable of love. Instead, they use everyone in their lives to meet their needs. They think of people as pawns in a game, not as humans that are deserving of love and respect and honor and decency. A previously unreleased audio obtained by Rolling Stone magazine alleged that he admitted to strangling his ex-wife. A man who strangles a woman can unalive her. Abusers, though, are very good at using manipulative language. Abusers typically live in the make-believe world where words don't mean what we think they mean, and they're free to switch words around in whatever patterns and rhythm suits their selfish needs at the moment. Granted, this was 2 years ago. He obviously is in a much different space now, with these conversations. The important things, you young ladies out there, the important thing I want young ladies out there to know about abusers is that they are very strategic in who they choose to abuse. It's not a mistake. It didn't just happen one time. This is a way of thinking about relationships that gets demonstrated in the physical realm. It's an energetic vibration around feelings of superiority. Abuse happens on a continuum, and abusers always choose their victim. This is why a man can abuse his wife and kids behind closed doors, but to the public, he can be an honorable and respectable and decent human being. This is why a man can rape one girlfriend but never rape another. Men choose which women they can abuse and which women they cannot. At its core, abuse is about denying your partner the right to equality by using power and control as an avenue to suppress their humanity. Abuse is a form of spiritual disease because you don't see that partner as being human like you. You see them as being less than human. And since you see them as being less than human, it gives you the green card to treat them in whatever way you see fit. And you don't feel any compassion, any remorse, any sadness, because to you, they are undeserving of the same treatment that you deserve. At its core, abuse is about denying your partner the right to equality and using power and control to keep them in a state of fear and imbalance. One of the very first jobs I worked while I was in graduate school was working for a domestic violence and sexual abuse center. It was there that I was introduced to the cycle of abuse. The cycle of abuse clearly illustrates that abuse happens on a continuum. It's not something that happens one time or that is isolated from the other things. It's all a pattern. As a result of his abuse and harassment charges, he was given 52 weeks of domestic violence classes, and he was also asked to go to therapy to address some of his issues. According to The Hollywood Reporter, he has since come out and reported a history of childhood sexual abuse. He reportedly admitted to being sexually abused starting at age 9 years old by both women and men. This is very important for you moms of boys out there. I need you to know that sexual abusers of children also abuse boys. It's not just girls. The abuse of children is about dominating children and having power over children and using that power to treat them any kind of way, regardless of what impact this abuse is having on them. I'm so glad that as a Black male, he is comfortable speaking about this, because there is so much sexual abuse that goes on in the Black community that never gets talked about. For that alone, he has my respect. I'm glad that Jonathan Majors is in a space where he can speak his truth. Even after the promo of Magazine Dreams died down, I hope that he continues going to therapy and he continues working on himself and continues to unearth this darkness, this demonic energy that was given to him by other unhealed adults. This is how monsters are created. They're created by other adults who refuse to heal. I hope he finds himself on the other side of this. I want to see him overcome this. I want to see him be great in spite of this history. Everybody deserves a chance to do it right after they've made a mistake. Everybody deserves a second chance. I'm not somebody who believes people need to be indefinitely canceled because they have emotional issues. However, it requires that the person be willing to take responsibility for their emotional issues and work on them, which is what he's doing. And he deserves to be commended for that. Grief takes time. Healing from trauma takes time. It takes a lot of work, and it's a work that never ends. You could be 20 years away from this traumatic experience and still have situations that come up that remind you of that trauma and that bring you right back to that space. That is the nature of the human experience. The only thing we can ask of ourselves is that we be committed to that work, that we be committed to continue to address it, to work on it, to be aware of it, to cope with it, to mitigate it, to find ways to stop spreading it on earth and stop giving it to each other. It's a lifelong journey. It's a journey that you have to be willing to go on. And yes, it's painful, but if you're courageous enough to face it, on the other end, there's a lot of strength that you get from being able to face the darkest thing that's ever happened to you and to come out of it with a different perspective, a different self-awareness and a different level of empowerment. As for their marriage, the demands of marriage are too great for this to be the perfect time for it. But I understand, given the realities of life and work, this needed to happen now. In a perfect world, I would have rather he had more time alone, away from the limelight, to reflect on everything that has transpired and to work on himself quietly, privately, not in this fashion. Not him crying in interviews talking about his love like Tom Cruise did with Katie Holmes. I would rather for him to be more private about that process and about his life. But I know that opportunity was not gifted him in this story, so he's doing the very best he can with the cards he was dealt. Trying to have a marriage while unpacking childhood trauma is very, very difficult. Very few people are able to do that successfully. I wish him and her nothing but the best. I hope the two of them are able to continue to thrive and grow in this relationship and continue to be partners together as they work their way through this relationship. I hope the two of them learn the karmic lessons that we're supposed to learn together, which is why they were brought together, so that they can make this relationship work. I hope that they continue to build their spirituality together. This is going to be a huge part of their evolution, that they use their Neptune energy to bring each other together and hold each other accountable in the best way possible. We all need people around us that we can trust to hold us accountable. It sounds like she's doing that for him, and I hope that he's able to be receptive to that and vice versa. What about you? What do you think about this marriage, this relationship? Leave your comments in the box below. Thank you so much for watching. You can book your astrology reading at intuitivehealing.com. You can also watch videos at Intuitive Healing here on YouTube for Astrology 101 content. Listen to the Aquarius podcast on Spotify, as well as here on YouTube for your horoscope. If you're interested in astrology and love connections, you can visit at Styled Under Libra. And of course, for health and wellness and holistic healing,
Visit at Styled under Virgo for all of your astrology content. Thanks so much for watching.